Hello, and welcome to the Digital Workspace Works podcast. I'm Ryan Purvis, your host, supported by our producer Heather Bicknell. In this series, you'll hear stories and opinions from experts in the field, stories from the front lines, the problems they face and how they solved them, the areas they focused on from technology, people and processes, to the approaches they took that will help you to get to the grips with the digital workspace inner workings.
We wanted to go through those URLs that we've been discussing. Should we start with the Outlook one first?
Sure. So this was Microsoft now letting you set, I think, at the overall group policy level to end meetings early. So automatic scheduling, making it easier to end meetings 5 to 10 minutes early so that you're not booking people like 5 hours in a row.
Yeah. So I'll be honest, I thought this was already there. So I use, so in my settings on my Outlook, I've set that every meeting is 5 minutes shorter or 10 minutes shorter, depending on the length by default. So when you book in a half an hour meeting, it's always going to be 25 minutes. When you book in an hour meeting, it's always going to be 50 minutes. And that largely has worked to an extent. What I noticed last night, which I think I sent you a screenshot of, is I was sending an email. What time was it? It must have been 7 p.m. or 8 p.m., something like that. And it actually popped up with a message across the top saying, do you want to send this email now? Or do you want to delay the sending of this email till tomorrow morning working time for the people that you're emailing? Who now these were internal people, so it obviously worked. It obviously knew they sort of had the data to know what time they would be in. And I said send it anyway, not because I was expecting a reply straight away, but I just didn't want to leave it to chance to wait for tomorrow morning. If they read it, if they read it last night and they could respond to it last night, then that would have suited me. We don't have any laws where I live and work in either country that says you can't send emails out of time zone, or out of working hours at least. Now in the sort of French or sort of France and in the Parisian areas, I think that is actually something that is legislated still, that you can't send emails out of work hours. So I thought it was quite a cool feature as well.
Yeah, I've triggered that feature before too. And it is nice to get the automatic, if you want to delay it, to have the automatic scheduling option right there, because I don't even know where to find it normally in Outlook. Usually I don't. If I send emails late, I'm not generally expecting a late reply. It's more just like getting it off of, I'm finished with it. I don't want to forget about it the next day. I think on the Outlook scheduling piece, I think you're right. It was there before. I think what's different about it is that you can now set it organization wide if you want. So more like
that would make more
by
sense,
policy type thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't really get that from the article, to be quite honest, but I was just reading very quickly. I mean, I think the thing that I like is that they, as Microsoft, and I think the other tech giants would also need to admit to this, that they are part of the problem, and they need to put in things that help solve the problem. The reason why it's a 30-minute or a 60-minute meeting is because that's what the defaults have always been.
Yep.
I mean, some poor engineer back in the day of building Outlook put those things in arbitrarily, and it's set the whole world on fire.
How long do people meet for? I don't know, 30 minutes, an hour.
Yeah, which often, I mean, we were laughing today. We'd booked an hour for a meeting, and we finished the meeting in like 10 minutes, and we're like, this doesn't happen very often. Should we talk about something else? And like everyone was like, no, we got too much work to do. We can end the meeting now. And I think that's definitely tying into the digital overload. We have too many meetings talking about too many things, and you could talk for hours and hours and hours and not get any work done. But at the end of the week, you still have to get work done.
Yep. I had a similar thought about the technology that exists to save us from technology. So whether it's things like enforcing, every meeting is going to not be an hour, but a few minutes shy of an hour, or even things like turning down the blue light on your phone at night, or the browser extensions you can get to like basically lock the internet for you so you can't, like time yourself out. Like there's this area of solution that exists to just save you from technology.
Yeah, I'm actually talking about that. I've started listening to a new podcast series called Sudar Breaks the Internet. And he's a guy that was hired by, he wrote a book I'm trying to remember this now. He wrote a book that Mark Zuckerberg read, or someone in his team read, and they got him to come work for Facebook. And he was looking at or focusing on all the or trying to solve spam, racism, all the isms really. So all that stuff that they do down in Facebook to try and clean up the content, he was brought in to do that with the team. And I've just listened to the first episode, and it is uncanny how a lot of the problems that social media has brought in, you have to use social media to fix too. It's a double-edged sword in the sense that it's as good as bad as the person using it, which I think ties into what you're saying.
It does, yeah. I mean, social media is like, yeah, a Pandora's box, I guess, kind of from that perspective.
Well, so I use that on my phone. I've got all those things set up for stopping me to do certain things, and I've noticed that I hardly hit those numbers anymore. Like I used to get to a stage where it would pop up and say, "Oh, you've run out of time for this today," and I haven't changed the setting, but I just noticed that I hardly get noticed anymore, which is a good sign, I think.
I think we get stuck in, we're creatures of habit. So I think if you get accustomed to spending, this is a part of the day where I check Twitter, or, oh, I'm taking my feed break between whatever I have going on. Once you break that habit, you realize man, maybe that content, maybe what I was doing wasn't really that interesting after all. Maybe it wasn't adding that much value to my life. It's more about, I think it's really interesting how you've seen that decrease, because in my mind, at least from my experience, that's what's happened. If I break a habit like that, especially with technology, I don't necessarily go back because it doesn't have the same appeal. It was just, habit.
Yeah, and I think I was reading something the other day that if you start your day like checking your phone for everything, that's how your day is going to be. You're kind of training your brain to be constantly checking. So if you can wake up in the morning and do a whole bunch of things that don't require checking your phone. And when I say checking your phone, I mean like the social media check-ins and that kind of stuff. Then later on in the day when you check that stuff, it becomes a lot more controlled. I'm doing this because I need to check for, it's not a dopamine check. It's a checking off this, list. I don't know how to say it exactly, but I've definitely noticed the days where I come straight to get my phone and I'm checking stuff. I spend the whole day, anytime I have a gap, checking stuff. Whereas if I get my phone and I go to a workout and I come back and then I do something else, then I kind of check stuff, but it's like not a stimulation for doing it. Yeah, I don't get that hit for doing it. So I think you got to train your brain to a large extent.
I think you do. And I think things like even just turning off notifications for certain apps is very helpful in my experience, especially social media. If I don't get a notification, phone wide, pop-up thing, I'm much less likely to go and check it, which has led to things like I still have Snapchat, but I just don't use it anymore because I forget about it, which is unfortunate because I miss a bunch of photos of my niece because that's where things get sent. So it's, it's kind of, there's just some downsides sometimes.
Yeah, well, it's like this other thing with Netflix. I saw a post the other day and listening to another podcast, and they also brought it up where someone says, "Oh, you shouldn't watch Netflix. You should read a book, or you should study a course, or whatever it is." And I was thinking, yeah, that's probably the right thing to say. But if you spent the entire day working and you've achieved a whole lot of things, and you got up early and you studied for an hour, and you worked a full day, you spend time with your kids, whatever it is, then who's to say you can't spend an hour or two watching Netflix? And as long as you go to bed, at a good time, you're not staying up till 2 o'clock in the morning watching Netflix. You're watching 1 or 2 episodes, maybe from 9 till 10, depending how long your episodes are, or 9 till 11. But that's your normal bedtime anyway. And you still go, I still read a book I read a chapter before I go to sleep. I don't think binging Netflix in that sense is such a bad thing. If you're watching, I know we've all done this, we found a good series and we've watched 6 hours in a day, and you're doing that every day, then yeah, that's a problem. That's the same as drinking a bottle of wine every day. That's a problem.
Yeah, moderation is key. Yeah, I don't know. Somehow we've really demonized leisure activity, or kind of said that's not an important part of life. We can cut that part out, which I think, depending on what you've been up to that day, I think, I don't know, what's going on in your brain to like reset and, log memories and whatnot. But I think if you just keep kind of going and stressing it out, I mean, we talked about burnout on a previous episode. Obviously, it all varies depending on the individual and what else you have going on in your life. But to me, that just sounds like a recipe for unhappiness eventually.
Yeah, I think we all went through it during the starting of lockdowns and that, where you felt like if you weren't working, you shouldn't be relaxing either, because you've got to work to, you've got a working day, but because you're at home, you're also kind of doing home stuff at the same time. So, you might go and start the washing, then go do a call, then come back and take the washing out and hang it. And that's like stealing from your work day, but you didn't commute for an hour and a half, 2 hours either. So you were working those hours as well. So there was almost a completely unbalanced view that you had to always be working, not necessarily doing anything else. And we actually discussed it in one of our team meetings recently, where part of our team's in India, so they're going back into lockdowns now because their cases have gone high. And we were saying, make sure you are taking breaks, and okay, you can't go for a walk necessarily, but do some exercise, or do something that's not by a screen. Because also going straight from your desktop where you've been working with the screen and then going to watch TV for half an hour to take a break is not really a break. You're just going from one screen to another screen. Your brain doesn't know the difference. So you've got to get out and get some fresh air if you can. Easy to say, I guess, if you're not stuck in a building, which some of these guys are stuck in a building.
Yeah, I think that aspect has just made it incredibly difficult, but it's great to have those open conversations. And I know we talk about this a lot, but just the culture and communication, that's what allows people to, gives them that permission, that like safety net to do things like, okay, I can go, I can exercise for 10 minutes, like take a little break doing that, which I think ultimately improves people's mood, is ultimately better for their work life in the long run, makes them happier, more productive. There's something to be said for breaks. So
yeah, you're right. Well, and I think that's what going back to the Outlook article, I think that's what it's trying to point to, is that having back-to-back meetings all the time. And I mean, we've all had those days where you're in 6 hours of meetings, 8 hours of meetings, and you're like, what have I done all day? I've just talked. And just taking a bio break is like an impossible mission. I mean, my toilet's right next to the door, and sometimes I can't even get there because it's like meeting, and then you just have a break, and someone says, "Oh, can I chat to you quickly?" You're like, "Oh, okay."
yeah, that was my yesterday, unfortunately. Sometimes I find myself, it's like there's like 3 minutes left in the meeting, and I'm like, fingers crossed, I hope we can wrap it up before the end of the hour. I think I think this is something that organizations should use at the overall level. It forces the default to shorten it. I'm assuming you can always go back in and make it a full hour if you want, but I would love to have more 50-minute meetings instead of an hour.
Well, it's Parkinson's law. I mean, if you give a meeting will expand to the time you give it. 9 times out of 10, probably 99% of the time out of 10, which is what, 9.9 out of 10. The thing that I find interesting is how many people get invited to meetings that don't need to be in the meeting, and they sit through the entire meeting, and they don't say, actually, you know what, this has got nothing to do with me, I'm out of here. But they'd rather sit in the meeting and do nothing or do other stuff. Yeah, you can see, and if they got the guts to turn the camera on, you could see them doing something else. It's fairly obvious, but it makes them look like they're busy because they're in a meeting, as opposed to doing some real work. Because you can't concentrate on the one thing at a time anyway. So there's no way you're listening in on the meeting.
I think that's a big problem, is just meeting explosion for who all gets invited. I think part of it is like, I was thinking about this. I think there's sort of like a room where it happens type mentality with meetings, that like, I don't, maybe there's a meeting where I'm not really going to be a participant, or, half the time I go to this meeting, 90% of the time I go to this meeting, I don't find value, but just like, you don't want to miss out on whatever information is shared. I think that can be part of it too, on the off chance that it could be interesting. And then I think, again, like just the cultural, organizational communication, the permission to say, hey, if you are on meetings and they don't need you there, feel free to, talk to the organizer and say, hey, thanks for the invite, but you can pull me in if you need me for something specific, but otherwise I'm going to drop out of this one.
Yeah, and I must admit that I do appreciate when people say that. Like I'm not attending. Like we had a meeting with one of us. We did a grant to me. We had to do a review meeting, and the monitoring officer said, "Look, I'm not involved in. I'm not required for this meeting, so I'm going to go on mute and turn my camera off, and I'll listen in, while I do some other work for when you guys are done." And he literally disappeared for 40 minutes. Came back as we finished up. He came back, said, "Okay, I'm back. What do we need to do? Okay, this is, these are the next steps," because he's not really supposed to be involved in the main part of the meeting other than to facilitate the start. And I thought that was a great use of time. He didn't interfere with the meeting. He got what he needed out of it, and we got done what we needed to get done. So it's a good angle.
So did you want to talk about another one of the articles?
I've got a hard stop now with another meeting, funnily enough. But yeah, we'll have to do those other ones in our next catch up.
Sounds good. Well, I hope may all your meetings end a few minutes early.
That's
my blessing to you today.
Never these ones. I always like these ones.
Yeah, no, this is fun.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Heather. I'll talk to you later.
Bye, Ryan.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Heather Bicknell is our producer and editor. Thank you, Heather, for your hard work on this episode. Please subscribe to the series and rate us on iTunes or the Google Play Store. Follow us on Twitter at the DWW podcast. The show notes and transcripts will be available on the website www.digitalworkspace.works. Please also visit our website www.digitalworkspace.works and subscribe to our newsletter. And lastly, if you found this episode useful, please share with your friends or colleagues.